The office was a battlefield, and I was losing. Not to deadlines or bugs in the code, but to him, Elliot Kane, the untouchable manager who could freeze a room with a single glance. I'd been at Novatech for 3 months, and every day, I waged a silent war to crack his icy facade. My name's Riley Chun, a 25-year-old coder with a knack for breaking systems, both digital and human. I wasn't supposed to fall for Elliot. He was my boss, the kind of man who wore tailored suits like armor and spoke in clipped sentences that left no room for warmth. But there was something about the way his blue eyes scanned the room, sharp and unyielding, that made my pulse race. I wanted to unravel him, to see what lay beneath that perfect control. So, I played the naive one, the eager new hire who accidentally brushed his hand during meetings or asked for help with code I already knew how to fix. It was a game. I thought I was winning. That morning, I leaned back in my chair, pretending to struggle with a Python script. The San Francisco skyline glittered through the glass walls of Novatech's open-plan office, a distraction I barely noticed. My real focus was Elliot, standing at the head of the conference room, presenting our latest app update to the team. His voice was smooth, authoritative, but I caught the way his eyes flicked to me when he thought I wasn't looking. Gotcha, I thought, hiding a smirk. Riley, he said suddenly, his tone cutting through the hum of the room. Your input on the UI. Now. I blinked, feigning surprise, and stood, adjusting my glasses for effect. Sure, Elliot. I was just tweaking some code, but I trailed off, letting my voice waver, all wide-eyed innocence. A few colleagues exchanged glances, probably thinking I was in over my head. Perfect. I walked to the front, standing closer to him than necessary. The UI's solid, but the color palette feels cold. Maybe we could warm it up? Add some vibrancy. I tilted my head, letting my gaze linger on his face a second too long. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. Cold, he repeated, his voice low, like he was testing me. Explain. I rambled about user engagement and emotional resonance, throwing in just enough jargon to sound convincing, but not enough to seem too polished. He listened, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he nodded once. Noted. Back to your desk. I returned to my seat, heart pounding. He hadn't taken the bait. Not yet. But I wasn't giving up. The game was just beginning. Over the next week, I doubled down. I'd linger by the coffee machine when I knew he'd be there, asking innocent questions about his weekend. I'd drop my pen during meetings, bending to pick it up just as he passed by. Once, I accidentally sent him a meme in the team chat, then apologized profusely in person, my hand brushing his arm as I laughed it off. Each time, his reaction was the same, a flicker of something, annoyance, curiosity, maybe both, before he shut it down. But I wasn't imagining things. There was a spark. I felt it in the way he held my gaze a beat too long, or how his fingers hesitated when our hands brushed. Elliot Kane was a fortress, but every fortress had a weak point. I just had to find it. Friday evening, the office was nearly empty. I stayed late, claiming I needed to debug a feature. In truth, I knew Elliot would be there, reviewing reports in his glass-walled office. I knocked on his door, holding a stack of printouts I didn't need. Elliot, got a sec? I asked, leaning against the doorframe, my shirt unbuttoned just enough to hint at the collarbone I knew he'd noticed before. He looked up, his expression guarded. What is it, Riley? I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. Just some questions about the back-end integration. I'm a little lost. I let my voice dip, vulnerable, and sat on the edge of his desk, close enough that our knees almost touched. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You're not lost, he said, his voice low and deliberate. You haven't been lost since the day you started. My heart skipped. I laughed, playing it off. What? Me? I'm just trying to keep up with you, boss. He stood, rounding the desk until he was inches from me. His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw something unguarded in them, something dangerous. Riley, he said, his voice like velvet over steel. If you're going to play games, at least play them well. I froze, my carefully crafted facade cracking. He knew. He'd known all along. And the way he was looking at me now, like a predator sizing up prey, told me I wasn't the only one playing. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as Elliot's words hung in the air. The office, usually a blur of noise and motion, felt suffocatingly still, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. His gaze pinned me to the spot, and for once, my usual quick wit failed me. Games, I managed, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to me. I'm just trying to do my job, Elliot. He tilted his head, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't warm or playful, it was a challenge. Your job, he said, stepping closer, doesn't involve dropping pens or lingering by my desk. So what's your angle, Riley? My pulse raced, but I wasn't backing down. I leaned forward, matching his intensity. Maybe I just like getting your attention, I said, my voice low, testing the waters. His eyes darkened, and for a moment, I thought I'd pushed too far. Then he chuckled, a sound so rare it sent a shiver down my spine. You're bold, he said, but not subtle. I grinned, regaining my footing. Subtle's overrated. Gets you nowhere. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken tension. I stayed where I was, perched on his desk, watching the way his shoulders tensed under his perfectly fitted blazer. This was it, the moment I'd been chasing for weeks. But now that it was here, I wasn't sure what I'd unleashed. Finally, he turned back to me. You think you've got me figured out, don't you? His voice was quieter now, almost intimate. The cold manager, all work, no play. Easy to crack if you push the right buttons. I shrugged, keeping my tone light. Am I wrong? He crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping so close I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne. You're not wrong, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But you're not the only one who can play. Before I could respond, he reached past me, his arm brushing mine as he picked up the stack of printouts. These, he said, flipping through them, are perfect. No errors. You didn't need my help. Caught. I opened my mouth to protest, but he held up a hand. Don't. If you're going to keep this up, at least be honest about it. My cheeks burned. Fine, I said, standing to meet his gaze. I like you, Elliot. Is that honest enough? For a split second, his composure faltered. His eyes widened, just enough to betray surprise, before the mask slipped back into place. You don't know me, he said, but there was a crack in his voice, a hint of something raw. Then let me? I shot back. Or are you too scared to let someone in? He stared at me, and I could almost see the gears turning in his mind, weighing the risk. Then, without warning, he stepped back. Go home, Riley, he said, his tone flat. We're done here. The dismissal stung, but I wasn't giving up. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, pausing to look back. This isn't over, I said, and I meant it. The next week was a blur of coded glances and careful distance. Elliot avoided me in meetings, his responses to my emails curt and professional. But I caught him watching me, when I laughed with a coworker, when I stretched at my desk, when I lingered too long at the water cooler. He was playing his own game now, and I had to admit, he was good. I upped my ante. During a team lunch, I sat across from him, casually mentioning a new gay bar downtown I'd heard about. You ever been, Elliot? I asked, all innocence, as our colleagues chatted around us. His fork paused midair. No, he said, his voice neutral, but his eyes told a different story. They burned with something I couldn't quite name. Anger, interest, maybe both. You should check it out, I said, leaning forward. Might loosen you up. A coworker laughed, oblivious to the undercurrent, but Elliot's gaze didn't waver. I'm plenty loose, he said, the words dripping with double meaning. My stomach flipped. That night, I stayed late again, this time for real work. The office was quiet, the city outside a canvas of twinkling lights. I was deep in a bug fix when I heard footsteps, Elliot stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He looked human. "Still here?" he asked, leaning against the frame. "Could ask you the same," I said, not looking up from my screen. He walked over, glancing at my coat. "You're better than you let on," he said. "Why hide it?" I met his gaze. "Maybe I like keeping you guessing." He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "Your trouble, Riley Chun. And you like it," I said, standing to close the distance between us. For a moment, neither of us moved, the air thick with possibility. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He stepped back, checking the screen, his face closing off again. "Get some rest," he said, already turning away. "We've got a big week." I watched him go, my heart pounding. He was slipping away, but I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The game had shifted, and I was on shaky ground. Elliot wasn't just playing defense anymore. He was counterattacking, and I was scrambling to keep up. Every look, every word from him felt like a chess move, calculated to keep me off balance. Monday morning, I walked into Novatech with a plan. If Elliot thought he could outmaneuver me, I'd show him I could match his pace. I wore a fitted shirt, one I knew hugged my frame just right, and made a point to laugh loudly at a co-worker's joke as I passed his office. His door was open, and I felt his eyes on me, a weight I couldn't shake. The team was prepping for a major client demo, and the pressure was on. Elliot was in his element, barking orders with that cool precision that made my skin prickle. During a briefing, he assigned me to lead the UI presentation. "Riley, you're on point," he said, his tone professional, but his eyes glinting with something else. "Don't disappoint." I nodded, my mouth dry. This was a test, not just of my skills but of my nerve. I spent the day refining my slides, weaving in the vibrant palette I'd pitched before, knowing he'd notice. When the demo rolled around, I stood at the front of the conference room, heart hammering, and delivered. The client loved it, and the team erupted in applause. Elliot, though, just gave a curt nod, his face unreadable. Afterward, he pulled me aside. "Good work," he said, his voice low. "But you're still playing." I raised an eyebrow. "And you're not." He didn't answer, just held my gaze until I felt heat creeping up my neck. Then he walked away, leaving me to stew in the tension. That night, I went to the gay bar I'd mentioned, half hoping he'd show up, half dreading it. The place was packed, neon lights pulsing to the beat of the music. I leaned against the bar, nursing a drink, when I felt a presence behind me. I turned, expecting a stranger, but it was him, Elliot, in a dark sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. "Didn't expect to see you here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He shrugged, signaling the bartender. "You invited me." My heart leapt. "So you're here for me?" He took his drink, his fingers brushing mine as he did. "Don't flatter yourself," he said, but his lips twitched, betraying him. We talked, really talked, for the first time. Not about work or code, but about life. He mentioned growing up in Chicago, the pressure of being the perfect son in a family that didn't understand him. I shared bits of my own story, moving from Seattle, always feeling like I had to prove myself. The bar faded away, and it was just us, two people peeling back layers we'd kept hidden. But then he stood, breaking the spell. "I shouldn't be here," he said, his voice tight. It's a mistake." "Elliot," I started, but he was already gone, disappearing into the crowd. The next day, he was colder than ever, avoiding me entirely. I threw myself into work, trying to shake the sting of his rejection, but it lingered. I'd gotten under his skin, but he'd gotten under mine too, and I hated it. By Thursday, the tension was unbearable. The team was crunching for a deadline, and Elliot was everywhere, his presence like a storm cloud. During a late-night session, I found him alone in the break room, staring at the coffee machine like it held the secrets of the universe. "Rough day?" I asked, leaning against the counter. He didn't look at me. "You need to stop, Riley." "Stop what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. He turned, his eyes blazing. This, whatever you're doing, it's distracting, and I don't have time for it. I stepped closer, refusing to back down. Maybe you need a distraction. For a moment, I thought he'd snap, but then his shoulders sagged, and he looked at me, not with anger, but with something softer, more vulnerable. You don't get it, he said. I can't afford to lose control. Not with you. My breath caught. Why not? He didn't answer, just shook his head and walked out. I stood there, heart pounding, realizing this wasn't just a game anymore. It was real, and it was terrifying. I couldn't sleep that night. Elliot's words echoed in my head. I can't afford to lose control. What did that even mean? Was he scared of me, of us, or something else entirely? I tossed and turned, replaying every moment. The bar, his fleeting vulnerability, the way he'd looked at me like I was both a puzzle and a threat. At Novatech, the deadline loomed, and the office buzzed with frenetic energy. I threw myself into my work, but my focus was shot. Elliot was everywhere, a constant pull on my attention. He'd walk by, his sleeve brushing my shoulder, or call my name in a meeting, his voice sharp, but his eyes lingering. It was maddening. He was playing my game better than I ever had, and I was unraveling. Friday morning, I caught him alone in the elevator. The doors closed, trapping us in a space too small for the tension between us. I didn't plan it, but the words spilled out. What's your deal, Elliot? You push me away, but you're here, always watching. What do you want? He didn't flinch, just met my gaze with that infuriating calm. You're assuming I want something. Bullshit, I snapped, stepping closer. You're not as untouchable as you think. The elevator dinged, and the doors opened. He stepped out without a word, leaving me fuming. But I saw the way his hand clenched at his side, the crack in his armor. I was getting to him. That afternoon, the team gathered for a final review before the client pitch. I was presenting again, and I poured everything into it, channeling my frustration into confidence. When I finished, the room clapped, but Elliot's reaction was all I cared about. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a ghost of a smile on his face. Impressive, he said, and the word felt like a victory. After the meeting, he called me into his office. I braced myself, expecting another lecture, but he closed the door and leaned against it, watching me. You're good, Riley, he said. Too good. I smirked, trying to keep it light. Told you I'm not just a pretty face. He didn't laugh. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice low. Why me? Out of everyone here, why are you so hell-bent on getting under my skin? I could have played it off, kept up the act, but I was tired of games. Because you're different, I said. You're all sharp edges and secrets, and I want to know who you are when you let go. He stared at me, his expression unreadable, then turned away. You don't know what you're asking for. Then show me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond, but the air between us crackled. I left his office, my heart racing, knowing I'd crossed a line. There was no going back now. That weekend, I didn't see him, but he was all I could think about. Monday morning, I arrived early, determined to confront him. But when I got to the office, he wasn't there. His assistant said he'd called in sick, Elliot, who never missed a day. I didn't buy it. I worked through the morning, distracted, until I got a text from an unknown number. Meet me at Golden Gate Park. 6 p.m. My stomach flipped. Was this a trick? A trap? I didn't care. I was there at 6, standing by the conservatory of flowers, the air cool and heavy with the scent of eucalyptus. He showed up in jeans and a hoodie, looking so unlike the polished manager I knew that I almost didn't recognize him. You came, he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. You asked, I replied, trying to read him. He gestured to a bench, and we sat, the city humming in the distance. I'm not good at this, he said, staring at his hands. Letting people in. It's messy. I waited, giving him space. Finally, he looked at me. I like you, Riley. More than I should. But I'm your boss. This could ruin everything. My heart soared, but I kept my voice steady. Then why are we here? He laughed, a bitter sound. Because I'm tired of fighting it. We sat in silence, the weight of his words settling between us. I reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. It was small, but it was everything. Holding Elliot's hand felt like holding a live wire. Electric, dangerous, and impossible to let go. The park around us faded, the chatter of joggers and the rustle of leaves drowned out by the thud of my pulse. For the first time, Elliot Kane wasn't a fortress. He was just a man, and he was letting me in. But the moment didn't last. He pulled his hand back, his expression shifting to something guarded again. "This doesn't change anything," he said, standing. "We can't do this." I stood too, frustration bubbling up. "You don't get to say that and walk away, Elliot. Not after that." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare sign of agitation. "You think this is easy for me? I'm risking everything. My job, my reputation." He trailed off, searching for words. "You're worth it, but it's not that simple." "Then make it simple," I said, stepping closer. "Tell me what you're so afraid of." He looked at me, his eyes raw. "Losing control. Losing you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I closed the distance between us and kissed him. It was impulsive, reckless, but the moment my lips met his, everything else fell away. He froze for a split second, then kissed me back, his hands gripping my jacket like he was anchoring himself. It wasn't soft or gentle. It was desperate, like we'd both been holding our breath for too long. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath uneven. "You're going to ruin me," he whispered. "Good," I said, grinning despite the ache in my chest. "You need it." He laughed, a real laugh, and for a moment, I saw the man behind the mask. But then his phone buzzed, and the spell broke. He stepped back, checking the screen, his face hardening. "I have to go," he said. "We'll talk later." He left me standing there, the taste of him still on my lips, my mind reeling. I didn't know what we were now, but I knew one thing. I wasn't letting him go. Back at Novatech, things got complicated. Elliot was professional to a fault, but there were moments, his hand lingering on my shoulder, a glance that held too much, that told me he hadn't forgotten. The team noticed nothing, but I felt the shift. We were dancing on a knife's edge, and it was thrilling. A week later, we were sent to a tech conference in Seattle. It was a chance to network, but for me, it was a chance to be near Elliot outside the office. We shared a hotel suite, separate rooms, but close enough to feel the tension. The first night, we stayed up late, going over our presentation. The air was thick with unspoken words, and when he brushed past me to grab a water bottle, I couldn't take it anymore. "Elliot," I said, catching his wrist. "Stop running." He looked at my hand, then at me. "I'm not running," he said, but his voice was rough, like he was fighting himself. "Then stay," I said, pulling him closer. He didn't resist. This time, when we kissed, it was slower, deeper, like we were learning each other. His hands found my waist, and I felt the walls he'd built start to crumble. We didn't go further, not yet, but it was enough to know he was in this, even if he was scared. The conference was a blur of panels and pitches, but every moment with Elliot felt charged. We stole glances in crowded rooms, our fingers brushing in the elevator. It was reckless, but I didn't care. I was falling for him, and I was pretty sure he was falling too. On the last night, we ended up at a rooftop bar, the city sparkling below. He was looser, a few drinks in, his tie undone. "Your trouble," he said, echoing his words from weeks ago, but this time, there was warmth in it. "And you love it," I shot back, leaning closer. He looked at me, his eyes soft. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I do." We didn't say much after that, just sat there, the city alive around us. But I knew we'd crossed a threshold. Whatever came next, we were in it together. Seattle changed us, but back in San Francisco, reality hit hard. Novatech was a pressure cooker, and our secret was a ticking bomb. Elliot and I were careful, too careful, but every touch, every stolen moment in the copy room or late-night office felt like playing with fire. One morning, I overheard a coworker gossiping about tension between us. My stomach dropped. Were we that obvious? I glanced at Elliot across the room, his face buried in his tablet, but I knew he'd heard it too. His jaw was tight, his focus too intense. We needed to talk. I cornered him in the break room at lunch, the office quiet as most of the team was out. We're slipping, I said, keeping my voice low. People are noticing. He didn't look at me, just stirred his coffee. I know. So what do we do? I asked, frustration creeping in. Pretend nothing's happening? Or tell someone? His eyes snapped to mine, sharp and guarded. Tell someone? Riley, this could end my career. Yours too. I flinched, but I didn't back down. So we just hide? Forever? He sighed, setting his mug down. I don't know. I need time. Time. It was the one thing I didn't want to give him. I wanted him, all of him, out in the open. But I saw the fear in his eyes, the weight of everything he'd built. So I nodded, swallowing my impatience. Okay, but don't shut me out. He reached for my hand, a rare gesture in the office, and squeezed it briefly. I won't. But he did. The next week, he was distant again, burying himself in work. Meetings were all business, his emails formal. I tried to reach him, dropping by his office with excuses, but he'd deflect, his walls back up. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit. Then came the bombshell. During a team meeting, our CEO announced a restructuring. Elliot was being considered for a promotion to director, but it meant relocating to New York. My heart sank. He hadn't mentioned it, not once. After the meeting, I followed him to his office, closing the door. New York, I demanded. Were you going to tell me? He looked tired, older than his 32 years. I was going to, he said. I just didn't know how. Bullshit, I said, my voice shaking. You're running again. I'm not running, he snapped, then softened. Riley, this is my career. I've worked for this my whole life. And what about us? I asked, hating how small I sounded. He didn't answer, just looked at me with those damn blue eyes, full of conflict. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm. Wait, he said. I don't want to lose you. Then don't, I said, pulling free. But you need to decide what you want, Elliot. Because I'm not playing anymore. I walked out, my chest tight. That night, I went to the bar again, hoping to drown my thoughts. To my surprise, he showed up, looking as wrecked as I felt. I'm sorry, he said, sliding into the seat next to me. I'm messing this up. Yeah, you are, I said, but there was no heat in it. Talk to me, Elliot. What's going on? He took a deep breath. I'm scared. Of this, of US, of what it means. I've spent my life building walls, and you tear them down without even trying. I reached for his hand, and this time, he didn't pull away. Then let me in, I said. All the way. He nodded, his eyes bright with something like hope. I'm trying, he whispered. We left the bar together, walking through the city, not touching but close enough to feel each other's warmth. For the first time, I believed we might make it. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. Elliot and I were together, but not fully, still hiding, still careful. But there were moments of light, stolen kisses in his car, late-night talks on my balcony, his hand finding mine under the table during a team dinner. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. The New York promotion loomed, a shadow over everything. Elliot hadn't decided yet, and I didn't push. I wanted him to choose me, but I wanted him to choose himself too. So I waited, pouring my energy into work and into us, hoping he'd find the courage to bridge the gap. One evening, he asked me to meet him at his apartment, a first. It was a sleek, minimalist space, all clean lines and neutral tones, but there were hints of him. A dog-eared book of poetry on the coffee table, a photo of a younger Elliot with his family tucked on a shelf. I felt like I was seeing him for the first time. I turned down New York, he said, handing me a glass of wine. I froze, my heart in my throat. Why? He sat next to me, close enough that our knees touched. Because I want this. Us. More than I want a title. I've spent my life chasing control, but with you I don't need it. I set my glass down, my hands trembling. You're sure? He nodded, his eyes steady. I've never been more sure. I kissed him then, and it was different. Open, unguarded, like we were finally on the same page. We didn't stop, falling into each other with a hunger that had been building for months. It wasn't just physical, it was a promise, a commitment to something real. The next day, we went to HR. Coming out as a couple was terrifying, but Novatech's policies were progressive, and our team was supportive. There were whispers, sure, but also congratulations, and for the first time, I felt like we could breathe. Elliot changed after that. He was still the sharp, driven manager, but there was a warmth to him, a lightness that made my heart ache. We built a life together, weekend hikes, lazy mornings, arguments over code that ended in laughter. He wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but we fit. Months later, we stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, the wind whipping through our hair. He took my hand, his grip firm. You were right, he said. I needed to let go. I grinned, pulling him close. Told you I'd ruin you. He laughed, kissing me as the waves crashed below. You didn't ruin me, Riley. You saved me. And in that moment, I knew we'd won. Not the game, but something bigger. We'd found each other, against the odds, and built something worth fighting for. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough.